Good evening. I'm Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, and with me is St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway. We're going to talk about an officer-involved shooting that occurred within the last couple hours here in St. Pete. As most people are familiar, back in 2020 we formed the Pinellas County Use of Deadly Force Task Force. And that means that when there's an officer-involved shooting, the investigation is conducted by an agency other than the agency that employed the officer that was involved in the shooting. So that's why the Sheriff's Office is the lead investigative agency in this case. So let me explain to you what happened tonight at about 5:30 p.m. There was a now identified male by the name of Germine, Germine. The last name is Small. He's a black male with a date of birth of March 8th, 1996. He's 28 years old. And he was in front of the Shady Side Food Mart at 4200 15th Avenue South here in St. Petersburg. And he had a firearm. It's a 9mm Glock handgun. Now, hear me on this. It's a 9mm Glock handgun with a 50-round drum for a magazine. 50 rounds he had in this thing. And he's firing at people in front of the Shady Side Food Mart at 4200 15th Avenue South. He then moves south, and about 5 minutes later, he fires into a residence. And I'm not going to give you the exact address, but it's in the 1600 block of 42nd Avenue South. So just a few blocks away from the Shady Side. There is a elderly male who's blind, lives in that house with somebody else, and he's shooting into the house. Everything that I'm telling you now is preliminary. I'm giving you the best information that I can with the information we have at the moment. Everything is subject to change. And right now, I can't tell you why he fired at the Shady Side Food Mart and why he fired into that house. But there are shell casings at both locations, and there are rounds that were fired into that home. So after he fires into the house, Small travels on 17th Avenue South, which is the street right here behind us, and he comes east. At that point, he had a very unique description. He was carrying that Glock with the 50-round drum wrapped in a towel, and the clothing description of what he was wearing. The St. Pete Police Department officers were in the area. Officer Dale Johnson was on 17th Avenue South, saw Small right here at the intersection behind us at 17th Avenue South and 40th Street. Small then, when he saw Officer Johnson, he kind of took off to the south and went back to the east. And he went into a lot of a residence, a yard, at 1711 40th Street South. So he's going to the south, he cuts back to the west, and then comes back to the north. And if you could see it earlier, you can't see it now because it's dark. That lot directly to my left, to your right over here, he came back up towards 17th Avenue. At that point, Officer Andre Sousa, S-O-U-S-A, was coming, again, eastbound on 17th and saw him. Officer Sousa pulls into the sand lot. At that point, Small took off running to the south, stopped, turned around, and fired the handgun at Officer Sousa. Now, we got some facts to flush out here, but at that point, Small continued south in the alleyway and came around the house and exited back, which would be right here behind us, in front of the house at 1711 40th Street South. At that point, he fired again at Officer Sousa, and Officer Sousa returned fire, striking him in the face. Small's injuries are not life-threatening. He was shot in the head. It was a wound that went in the front and out behind his ear, but again, they're not life-threatening. At that point, he dropped the firearm, and I'll have our public information office give you a copy of the photograph of the firearm. Again, it's a Glock. It's laying on the ground here behind us with that 50-round drum. He dropped the gun. He dropped the towel. His shoe came off. He ran across the street. And when he ran across the street to a house here on the east side of 40th Street, other officers took him into custody. So this guy, Small, who's shooting at the cops, shooting into the food store, shooting into the house with the 9mm, with the 50-round drum, is that he was just released from the Florida Department of Corrections on March 2nd of 2024, where he got done serving 9 years for an armed robbery with a firearm. He has a lengthy history of resisting with violence, grand theft of an auto, grand theft of a firearm, and a whole bunch of other felonies. So this is the same old song and dance where these people don't learn their lesson, and he hasn't even been out of state prison after serving 9 years. He hasn't even been out of state prison a month, and he's already got a Glock 9mm with a 50-round drum, and he's trying to kill a cop and shooting into a store and shooting into a house. So we'll flush this out more and try and figure out why he was doing what he was doing. But bottom line is to try to kill a cop. And luckily Officer Sousa was able to fire back, strike him, and we're able to take him into custody. That's about all I can tell you. Those are what we know at the moment. Again, and I'll reiterate it, I'm telling you everything we know as we know it at the moment, and it's all preliminary information. The investigation's ongoing. I anticipate we'll be here for a while tonight. There's several different scenes, a lot of physical evidence out here, and we probably won't have any more updated information. If anything changes tomorrow, but probably Monday before we have anything else. But again, I will release a copy of the photograph of that firearm with the 50-round drum, and I'm happy to take any questions that you all have for me, and if Chief Holloway wants to add anything, we can. Be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you know if this had any connection to the shooting that happened yesterday in the same area?
There's no evidence that's connected to anything else.
How many rounds did he fire off near the mart?
So it's yet to be determined because he had, again, that 50-round drum magazine. I can tell you that I saw in front of 1711 40th Street South, I saw several spent shell casings from where he was and where the gun was, as well as some live rounds that are in there, and then he shot at Officer Sousa from the sandlot over here in that alleyway. So bottom line answer to your question is we don't know. Until we're able to get in there in forensics and try and see, again, we don't know where that drum was at full, how many rounds were in there, so until we can start recovering shell casings, but it was several, but how many exactly, I don't know.
Was it enough for the food mart to close, or did they stay open?
Well, it's a crime scene right now, so it's secured as a crime scene right now.
When you guys were first alerted of the shooting to being brought into custody, how much time was that?
So probably about total time in there is probably about 8 minutes.
Were there any witnesses inside the food mart?
We're working on that now.
Any indication that he knew the gentleman on the house?
No, that's what I'm saying is that really it's a puzzle for us as to why he fired at people at the food mart and why he fired into this particular house. And again, that's something that we're going to have to try and figure out during the course of the investigation. Is this just a guy who got out of prison? Was he out doing more robberies? He's trying to jack somebody? Is he have a beef with somebody? Again, at this point, I just don't know.
Is that drum illegal?
The drum itself is not illegal. No.
What about the person in the house? Is he okay?
They're okay. Luckily, other than Small being shot, no citizens or police officers were shot or injured, thankfully.
Do we know if he resides in this area? I may have missed that.
Yeah, Small lives at, I'll give you the last known address that we had for him is 3801 16th Avenue South. That's the last address that we had for him. But again, he's only been out of state prison for less than a month.
So is he a convicted felon?
Multiple times. I mean, if he did 9 years in state prison, he's a convicted felon. But he's got a lot of prior felonies to that as well. Again, like I said, resisting arrest with violence, grand theft of a firearm, grand theft auto, all kinds of stuff. I mean, this guy is, a career criminal train wreck. And, luckily now is that because he just got out of state prison and with these charges, he should be classified as what's called a PRR, prison release reoffender, and it should be a mandatory life sentence. So this guy should not be back on the street, terrorizing the people of St. Petersburg ever again.
How frustrating is it for you guys, law enforcement, for a guy with his record to get a weapon like this with that kind of capacity?
Huge, it's a long way away. But look at what just happened in New York City with that officer, and they did the funeral for him up there today. And look at those guys. Is that those guys up there had lengthy criminal histories, like 21 felonies, all kinds of stuff. It's very frustrating, very concerning, and it should be for everybody. we've made some great effort in the last couple legislative sessions, especially as it relates to juveniles. Now, this guy's not a juvenile. He's 28 years old, but, his crime spree started as a juvenile. And, some bills passed the legislature this year tightening it up with guns and kids. And that's where we got to start. And there has to be consequences. And, but then you get a guy that did 9 years in a robbery, and he's not even out for a month. And he's got, again, a gun, and I don't know, but chances are it's stolen, and a 50-round drum on it is that there's no question what he was up to and out there. So, yeah, it's very frustrating. These people who are high recidivists, career criminals, that have no regard for human life, and out there shooting at people and shooting at cops. Bad.
So how it is he right now, the suspect? How is he?
He's in stable condition. It's not life-threatening, as I said. It is that doctors have told us is that his condition is stable. It is not life-threatening.
Chief, anything that you want to ask?
No, it's not that I want to add. The sheriff covered everything, and just like you said, this guy just got out of prison in, less than a month, and he's already committing crimes again.
Do you know if he served his full sentence? Was 9 years his full sentence?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, we got all kinds of stuff going on, preliminary information. You can look it up. He in Florida, which is a good thing, is you have to do at least 85%. So I don't know exactly what his sentence is. He went in 2015 and he got out a month ago, or less than a month ago. So he did 9 years. Exactly what his sentence was, I'm not sure on that.
You can assume that the gun is stolen, but if it's not stolen, how in depth do you look to try to find out where that gun came from and how he got possession?
Well, you really can't. We'll trace it and we'll look back on it. But remember, in Florida, there's no gun registration. He can't lawfully possess a gun because he's a convicted felon. He couldn't lawfully buy it. He could buy it on the street someplace, and that's what they do, or they steal it. A gun like that, you can buy a gun like that on the street for a couple $100. I mean, that's just that's what happens, and that's what they go for on the street. But what we can trace and find out is we can find out where it was last sold by what's called an FFL, which is from an FFL, which is a federal firearms licensee. But beyond that, if it was changed hands 4 or 5 times through private sales, etc., there'd be no record of it. We wouldn't know what. And I don't know, and I want to be clear with this, what experience tells me and history tells me, because we deal with this every day, is that majority of these guns, these crime guns, are getting into the wrong hands because they're stolen out of cars and people leave their guns in their cars. So we'll find out once we can process the gun and get the serial number and run it. We'll find out where it was stolen from, assuming it was, or it's in the system. And if not, we'll look. But there's no registration of guns in Florida.
Shocking, surprising. That's a 50-round thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking and disturbing. I mean, it's unfortunately, it's not like unheard of, and it's not. I wouldn't call it unusual. They're out there, and but it's very, very disturbing. And a guy out here with that kind of firepower, and I say firepower from a capacity standpoint, 50 rounds is a lot of rounds. All right, thanks everybody.